This is Tips for Travellers. Inspiration, advice, and tips on finding and having amazing travel experiences on both land and at sea. Get more tips on must-see and must-do travel at tipsfortravellers.com.
Well, hello and welcome to another episode. This is Gary Bembridge, and today we're heading off to one of my favourite places in the world, Palm Springs. This is definitely a place that I will own a place at some point and spend some of the year there. I absolutely love Palm Springs, and we're revisiting Palm Springs. It's been a long time since I've did a podcast about Palm Springs, so this is an all-new podcast, lots of new tips, advice, and so on. It's a really unusual, quirky place, and it's growing in popularity. It's a real haven in California, close to the sort of border with Nevada, really, I suppose. But it's really just a magical, magical place for so many reasons. And I'm going to talk about that in the podcast. Just to let you know that today's podcast, by the way, is brought to you by audible.com. And you can get a free audiobook, download a 30-day free trial. There's 180,000 titles to choose from. And if you go to tipsfortravellers.com/audible, and you can sign up, get your free audiobook, your free trial. Even if you don't stick with the trial, you can keep the audiobook, and you'll also find a link in the show notes. So that's tipsfortravellers.com/audible. Don't forget the Travellers is spelled with 2 L's. So let's get on and talk about the fabulous city of Palm Springs. It's very unique in so many different ways. One of the most notable things that makes it unique is the look and the architecture. And I'll talk in much more detail about this mid-century modern architecture. But the city is almost caught in a time bubble with this beautiful architecture from the 40s, the 50s, the 60s. And it's really magical. It's almost like a museum, beautifully maintained. It's absolutely gorgeous, like no other place that I think I've been to in the world. It's also got a very unusual atmosphere. There's a very large gay community there. There's lots of families there, and it has a real sort of party atmosphere in many ways, but not as in partying atmosphere. I guess carnival in some ways is a better way of describing it. Lots of people go there for short breaks, vacations, have retired there, and it has a very sort of great atmosphere around it. Almost feels like it's permanently a vacation spot. It very much has a season, which is actually in winter. It gets very, very, very hot in summer months, the middle of the year. And a lot of people who live in Palm Springs leave Palm Springs. And so the tourists tend to go in winter where it has great weather, so people kind of escape there. There's lots to do within the town, but there's even more to do within the wider vicinity of Palm Springs, which also makes it a great place. And that's one of the things I mentioned why I'd love to live there, partly because it's a great place to live, but there's so much to do within, a fairly short distance. It can get extremely hot. So in July, it's very, very hot. It's very intense heat because it's right in the desert. I actually have been there many times in the middle of summer. People think it's a crazy place to go in summer, but I love it. It does get really hot. But it's really that community feel. It's very friendly. People are very welcoming. And it does feel like a city that is just so welcoming of people. It really has a great, great atmosphere about it. And I can see why so many people like to move to the area and live there, because it does have this great community feel. So a couple of key facts and things you need to know. It's about 107 miles east of Los Angeles, about 172 kilometers, and that 100-mile distance is very important, as I'm going to explain a little bit later. And one of the reasons that Palm Springs became so important was that it was 100 miles away from Hollywood and the heart of the studio system. It's also quite close to San Diego. It's only about 123 miles away from San Diego, and it's about a 4.5-hour drive to Las Vegas. The permanent population is quite small. It's only about 45,000 people. I've said it and I'll say it again, it's really famous for its mid-century modern architecture and design. It really is, if you're into that kind of architecture and design, it's a real center of design in the architecture and everything around it. It's just beautifully maintained. It's also got, and I mentioned it a little bit earlier, it's got the highest concentration of same-sex couples of anywhere in the United States. And a former mayor has estimated that at least a third of Palm Springs are gay. So it's got quite a big gay population. In terms of the history, I'm going to focus probably on the more recent history than the ancient history of Palm Springs. It became a very fashionable resort originally back in the 1900s, and health tourists used to go there because they were sent there for conditions to deal, which it was felt that dry heat would help. But it, in summer, even then, it wasn't very popular, particularly because then you didn't have things like air conditioning. So people would go there as a sort of a health resort for dry heat. During the Second World War, Palm Springs and the whole valley became quite important in the war effort. The original airfield near Palm Springs was used for training, the Air Corps. It was became very, very important as a sort of a training and staging area during the Second World War. Palm Springs, though, really kicked off when it became a playground for Hollywood stars and celebrities. Now, I've alluded to this, but in the days of the studio system, stars that were contracted to the studios were not allowed to go further than 100 miles from Hollywood when films were in production. And Palm Springs is conveniently that distance away from Los Angeles. So people would head there. And so a lot of the architecture of that period really flourished because, people with money and influence basically were investing in the city. So they were eager to explore, innovations, new ways of building things, and they wanted to build these great places to go, to party, to misbehave, and get away from the prying eyes, I guess, of the paparazzi and whatever. So, you'd have all the famous stars went there, whether Elvis Presley and Priscilla Presley went there. You had the Rat Pack, just anyone who was anyone in that period either lived or visited Palm Springs a lot, and you'll find a lot of the places you stay will have stories of the celebrities from that era who stayed there. The city kind of went into decline and recession through the 70s into the early 80s because obviously the studio system broke down. Air travel made it easy to go, more diverse. They didn't have to stick within the 100 miles. And so the younger generation of stars didn't really see Palm Springs as particularly attractive. So it kind of went into a lot of decline. And it really became back into popularity when developers sort of started looking at it and thinking of the city as a great retirement centre. And for some reason, which I've never quite understood, it really took off with gay men and women. And it also became very popular for golfing breaks. It's got lots of golf clubs. It started to attract conventions, events, and there are lots and lots of activities and events. And I'll talk that shortly when I talk about the best time to go. Pretty much all year round, there are things going on. So the city now, it looks prosperous. It's very beautifully maintained. It's very clean. It's very tidy. There's lots of despite of the heat and the desert, it's got lush green sidewalks, it's got beautiful palm trees, but that architecture is just amazing because the people who moved in the sort of the 70s, the 80s and beyond have really taken great pride in sort of maintaining this architecture. So it's a real thing of pride. So let me talk about the best time to go. I've already said that the key season is winter, and the peak time really runs from January through to May. It becomes much more expensive. The hotels cost much more. So there's kind of a ripple effect. It does get very hot in summer. The minimum of 26 degrees, even at night, but it'll go up to 40 degrees and above. If you're in a Fahrenheit person, that's about 110 or more degrees Fahrenheit. It's very dry, although it's very sizzling. It's not that sort of sticky heat. The season during winter, it gets lots of buzz. There's lots going on. There are lots and lots and lots of events. And, if you pick up, or even if you go to the website, visit palmsprings.com and you pick up some of the material, you'll see a big section of it, and I've got it just in front of me here, lists, pages of it, list all the activities. So in January, you've got everything from the International Film Festival, the Tour de Palm Springs. In February, you've got Modernism Week, which celebrates the architecture. You've got classic car shows. You've got, in March, you've got the Native Film Fest. You've got a tennis tournament in April. You've got the Dinah Shore Weekend, which is the famous gathering for lesbian women. You've got the White Party, which is the big gay and lesbian party. You've got the big Coachella Valley Music Festival. In May, you've got the Film Noir Festival. In June, you've got the Restaurant Week. In July, you've got fireworks. September, you've got the LGBT Film Festival. October, you've got Women's Jazz Festival. November, you've got Pride Weekend, Veterans Day Parade. December, you've got Festival of Lights. So, and I've only just pulled out a couple of examples. So, obviously, it's the winter time when there's more activities, but if you're planning to go to Palm Springs, just take a look at when some of these events are on and sort of perhaps coincide with being there, because the city is great all the time, but it becomes fantastic when those events are on. In terms of getting there, it's pretty easy to get there. It's about a 2-hour drive. from San Diego and from Los Angeles. You can fly into the airport, but there's very limited destinations. You're more likely to be able to fly in at winter time. So this airport's very seasonal. But you can fly in the season from like Toronto, Vancouver, San Francisco, Seattle, Dallas, Chicago, Phoenix, Salt Lake City, JFK, Denver. So, in the season that there's quite a few places you can fly in. Obviously, as you've heard from those are a lot of the, the US hub airports you can fly in. In terms of getting around, you kind of need a car, really. It can be very hot. There is some public transport, but a car is pretty important. There is a bus which is called the Buzz, and it's a free hop-on, hop-off trolley. It runs from Thursday to Sunday. So if you're there sort of on a weekend, you could probably get away without having a car, particularly if you want to drink and stuff. So that is just sort of general tips. So let me talk about my overall tips for travelers before I get into the must-see sites and must-see attractions. One of the things I would recommend is go to the visitor centre. It's on North Palm Canyon Drive, right at the entrance to the aerial tramway. It's in this beautiful building, and they're so helpful and friendly in there. There's lots of volunteers who man it, as well as permanent staff. They're so friendly. They love promoting the city. They'll spend lots of time helping you out with things to do. The other thing, though, is there's lots of really good sites and great apps if you're visiting Palm Springs. So the official site I've referred to is visitpalmsprings.com, so very easy to remember. There's a great app, and it's got a funny old link, so it's probably the easiest thing to do is either search on your where you get over your iTunes, your iPhone apps, or your Android apps from, and just look for the Visit Palm Springs official app. There's also a really good leaflet, and I've already referred to the leaflet, which I would strongly recommend picking up because it has all the events, it has places to eat, to stay, etc. But also you'll find a couple of other things like some great walking tours. So there's tours about architecture, there's tours about history, and again you can pick those up at the visitor centre or find links on the site. And the main place to stay, by the way, is guest houses. So people tend to stay in these sort of guest houses which are maybe 10 to 20 rooms around a central courtyard swimming pool. And one of the places that we stayed at, I've stayed at lots of different ones. In our most recent trip, we stayed at a great place which is called San Lorenzo. And this is sort of like more of an apartment place. So it's a great place to stay. You can do short-term and long-term lets. But what's great about it is it has a kitchen and stuff. So it's also really good if you wanted to, just not eat out all of the time, if you're there for, say, more than just a weekend. So let me get into my 10 must-see sites and attractions if you're going to Palm Springs. Now, some of these are in Palm Springs and some of them are a little bit further afield. So my first tip is really part of an institution in Palm Springs, and that was to try and be in Palm Springs on a Thursday evening and visit the evening fair. There's a street fair that's been a long-standing tradition, and the main shopping road, Palm Canyon, gets closed off. In the winter season, there's up to about 170 independent store holders. They sell all sorts of food, art, jewelry, trinkets until about 10 o'clock in the evening. It gets pretty packed. It's very popular both with locals and visitors, and it's a great atmosphere there. It's I really love it. And Thursday to Sunday is when the California weekenders arrive, so it kind of kicks off that whole sort of weekend period. It's there's not lots of things that I particularly bought or like, but stroll around, there's lots of paintings, homemade things, food. It's a really good fun. It's really a great atmosphere, and it's almost a must. I think if you're going to Palm Springs, not going to that fair on a Thursday night seems like a really missed opportunity. The second thing that I really think you should do is the MidCentury Modern Architecture Tour. Now, you can go on guided tours, and you can find those by when you go to the Visit Palm Springs site or to the visitor centre. So you can actually go on guided tours, where either walking tours or little buses that drive you around. But you can also do another great thing, which is what I actually did, and I really liked it, which is you can do a self-guided tour. So if you've got a car, now you can either get a map from the tourist centre, which costs about $5, or you can download an app, which again costs a couple of dollars. This is excellent. This is what I did. It gives you a guided tour. It's all in different categories. It has about 80 different places you can go, and it includes things like profiles of the architects. It tells you by location. It tells you, something that has little videos of some of the interiors, because obviously you can't go into some of these places. It has little videos, and it's really, really good. If you just look for the Palm Springs Modern Mid-Century Tour, and I will put links in the show notes so you can actually get that. But it's fairly easy if you just go to your app store and put in Palm Springs Modern Mid-Century, and you'll find that app. As I said, it does cost a couple of dollars, but it's great. I did a self-tour and I actually created a video based on the tour, and you can actually see the video of the places we went to, some of the places we went to. So if you go, I'll put a link again in the show notes, but also if you go to YouTube and search Tips for Travelers Palm Springs, or you go to the website tipsfortravelers.com and search Palm Springs, you'll find a little video tour that I did of that. So another place, if you want looking for tours, by the way, if that doesn't appeal to you, there is a site which is called themoderntour.com, and they have some tours there, themoderntour.com. My third tip, and something I also really loved, is the Palm Springs Air Museum. I really think it's worth a visit. It's situated by the airport on Gene Autry Trail, and it's a beautifully maintained museum. It's dedicated to the Second World War. Remember I said there was a link to the Second World War in Palm Springs. There's a huge hangar focusing on the Pacific, part of the war, another one on Europe. They've got a beautiful collection of planes, of cars. The museum is full of staffed by volunteers, a couple of which were actually in the Second World War. They're very welcoming. They have lots of stories, lots of anecdotes about the planes. It's great. And actually what I discovered is most of the planes are still in airworthy condition. If you want to find out more, you go to palmspringsairmuseum.org. I really recommend it. It's great. I mean, it might sound a bit dull, but seriously, it's fantastic. My fourth tip is the Palm Springs Aerial Tramway, and that's a very long cable car. It rises over 6,000 feet and it gives you a beautiful view of the valley. The cable cars apparently are the world's largest. They take 80 people at a time. It runs about every half an hour. One goes up, one goes down. So it's not massively frequent, but it takes a lot of people. So at the top, you're in the Mount San Jacinto State Park, and you can go hiking. There's also a restaurant up there, which wasn't particularly good, but there is a restaurant up there. Now, what's interesting is the temperature at the top is usually about 30 degrees Fahrenheit lower. So even if it's scorching down in the valley, most people take something warm to wear when they go to the top of the mountain. It's very alpine-like, so it's completely different to what you have in the valley. And in winter, apparently, you can even do a bit of cross-country skiing. I've made a video and I've done some photos of the Palm Springs Aerial Tramway review on the site if you want to find out more about it. It's a great outing. It's really fantastic. And if you want to actually go hiking and spend time overnight, so if you go up on the early cable cars, got lots of people who've been hiking coming back down instead of overnight. My fifth tip is the Palm Springs Art Museum. This was founded in 1938. And it used to be called the Palm Springs Desert Museum. And basically what they do is they focus on art, performing arts. They've got exhibitions, they've got collections, and it's a great art museum. They focus on the 19th, 20th, 21st century, particularly on Californian art, but they also have quite a good collection of Native American art, Mexican art, some European art, and again, they focus on a lot of the mid-20th century architecture, American photography. So it's quite an eclectic and varied collection. It's a great thing. So that's the Palm Springs Art Museum. Really strongly recommend you go. It's sort of parallel to the main street. The sixth thing I would do, because it's such a part of Palm Springs, is the celebrity tour. Over 500 celebrities have called Palm Springs home at some time. So there's lots of houses and stories about where they live to see. And the best tour started right back in 1963. It's been going for a long time. You can go on like a 2.5-hour tour or 1-hour tour. And the best place to go and find tours is celebrity-tours.com. So celebrity-tours.com. You can go and see about 100 celebrity homes. It's really good. It's really good fun. And if you want another tour, if the celebrity-tours.com doesn't appeal, there's one which is called thebestofthebesttours.com. So if you go to thebestofthebesttours.com and look for the Rich and Famous tour, that's another great tour. My seventh tip is the wind farm tour. If you're driving into Palm Springs, you'll see loads of wind farms, and so if you can pull yourself away from the pool or touring all the architecture and celebrity homes, the wind farm's really, really interesting. The farm was built up from the 1980s, and it takes you around. It takes you to the power station. It lets you know how it was built, and it's really, really, really interesting. And again, you can find out more about those tours at the visitor center or at the bestofthebesttours.com. So a couple of things that I really love doing when I go to Palm Springs is, one of them is, which is my tip number 8, is Pioneer Town and the Joshua Tree National Park. It's not that far a drive. I'm trying to think how long it was, maybe 40 minutes, an hour away. Pioneer Town was originally created in the 40s as a permanent set for Wild West movies and shows, and something like 200 or 300 shows and films have been done there. And although part of it was destroyed in a fire, it's basically this old Western town. It's like stepping back into a movie, or stepping into a movie. The actual buildings themselves now have quite interesting arts and crafts shops in, so it's a fascinating place to go. I've got a great video on that, which I did. Again, if you go to the site and search for Pioneer Town, or go to YouTube, Tips for Travelers, Pioneer Town, you'll find that video. Not that far away is the famous Joshua Tree National Park, and you can do this as a sort of a day trip. Go to Pioneer Town, then drive a little bit through Joshua Tree National Park, which is great. Two other things which are more sort of light and fun. The Fantasy Springs Casino is really good fun, and it's worth seeing what stars are playing. So you'll often find this shows on till the weekend, and it might be sort of bands from the 80s or the 90s. When we were there, like Chicago was playing, I think UB40 were passing through, and various bands like that. But it's an an American Indian-owned casino. It's a very well-run casino. It's a beautiful casino. Lots of machines, games, tables, etc. Sign up for the loyalty card. You get some extra play. And it's really good fun evenings. It's got restaurants there. Really good fun. And again, it's about an hour or so drive out of Palm Springs. And the last thing to do, which is if you're with kids or you've got a bit of a kid mentality, is, of course, there is Wet and Wild. And I love water parks, so Wet and Wild is always a place I like to go to in Palm Springs. It's a pretty good Wet and Wild, and it's really, really good fun. So those then are my 10 tips and a little bit about Palm Springs. Again, just to remind you, great site is the visitpalmsprings.com site and their app. There is, if you're interested in LGBT travel, there's visitgaypalmsprings.com, and those apps, the Visit Palm Springs app, the MidCentury Modern Architecture Tour app, and there's also another app actually when you're searching for Palm Springs, which is the Palm Springs Map Tour, which has 21 places to go to. So there's a whole bunch of apps and things, so you're pretty well served when you're looking to find places to eat, places to stay, that kind of stuff, with apps and online. So that's all I have for you in terms of Palm Springs. Just a reminder that the podcast is brought by Audible. You get a free audio book, a free 30-day trial, and even if you don't keep going with the trial, you can keep the audio book. You go to tipsfortravelers.com/audible, remembering that travelers are spelt with 2 L's. I'd love it if you left a review, and I'd love it if you subscribe to the podcast, and you can do that either on iTunes, on TuneIn, on Stitcher, pretty much any podcast app that you want. to search for Tips for Travelers, and in the show notes I have short links to to go to any of those sites. And the easy way of remembering it is you just type in tipsfortravelers.com/iTunes TFT or Stitcher TFT or TuneIn TFT, and that'll take you straight there, and you can either review or subscribe, and I'd really, really appreciate it if you do that. It's great to get feedback and find out what you like, or even what you like more of or less of, or whatever. So that's all I have for today. Palm Springs, fabulous place, one of my favorite places in the world. And until next time, here's to happy, safe, and wonderful, wonderful travels.